If you had met Claire Bennett 10 years ago, you would have met a woman full of dreams. She was the kind of person who could hush a crowded room with her voice alone, soft, haunting, and rich with emotion. Music was her first love, and performing was her soul's language. But as is often the case in real life, dreams meet practicality, and eventually practicality wins. After graduating from Dalhousie University, Claire traded her guitar for a desk job, becoming a financial assistant at a small credit union in Halifax. The job was steady, offered benefits, and helped her chip away at student loans, but each morning she walked into that office, a little piece of her musical self got quieter. Claire's life took a surprising turn at a university reunion hosted in early spring. She wasn't planning on going, but a friend convinced her last minute. That's where she met Ryan Martin, tall, well-dressed, and full of charisma. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without trying. They were paired up during a trivia game, and his quick wit and infectious laugh made Claire smile more than she had in months. Ryan was a financial consultant based in Montreal, but had grown up in the Maritimes. Like Claire, he once had creative aspirations. He'd been in a dance troupe in college, something he confessed to her over drinks after the event. But you know, he said with a shrug, real life doesn't always care about your dreams. Those words stuck with her, not because they were harsh, but because they felt shared. Two dreamers who had grown up, both sacrificing passion for security. Within weeks, they were dating long distance, and by the end of the year, Ryan relocated to Halifax. Everything moved quickly, but Claire didn't mind. For the first time in years, she felt chosen, seen, and understood. Their relationship was like a page out of a romantic novel, spontaneous beach walks, shared playlists, Saturday mornings spent cooking and laughing. Ryan supported her in little ways. He bought her a vintage microphone when he found out she used to sing. He told her she had a voice worth hearing, even if the world never did. They married on a quiet September afternoon, the ceremony held at a vineyard just outside Wolfville. Claire wore a lace gown with sleeves that danced in the wind. Her mother cried. Ryan looked at her like she was his entire future. Shortly after the wedding, Claire stepped away from her job. Ryan's career was flourishing, and he insisted she take time to just breathe, after years of pushing herself. It sounded like kindness, and maybe it was. But with each passing week, Claire noticed the subtle ways her world was getting smaller. The first shift came in the form of his mother, Margot, an impeccably dressed woman with sharp features and even sharper opinions. Margot visited often, unannounced and full of critique. "The curtains are too long for the windows," she said during her first visit. Ryan always preferred clean lines. Claire nodded, tucked the comment away, and said nothing. Margot had a way of making Claire feel like a guest in her own life. Still, Claire tried. She learned to fold towels the way Margot liked, adjusted the spice rack, vacuumed in the afternoon because mornings are for fresh starts. Ryan, for his part, didn't see the tension. Or maybe he chose not to. And yet, Claire kept believing in the marriage. Believed in Ryan's affirmations, his promises, the way he brushed her cheek when she sang to herself while folding laundry. But what she didn't know then, what she hadn't yet seen, was that behind the sweet gestures and carefully arranged domestic life, cracks were forming in the foundation. Not all at once, but slowly, like a quiet, invisible storm. And soon, the winds would begin to howl. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, at first, Claire told herself it was just adjustment, new rhythms, new roles, a new family. But by the time autumn faded into the biting chill of Halifax winter, Claire could no longer deny that something had shifted. Ryan, once the man who brought her tea while she worked on her music late into the night, began coming home later and later, citing back-to-back meetings or last-minute client calls. When Claire tried to greet him at the door, he barely looked up from his phone. He'd murmur something about being exhausted, drop his briefcase, and disappear into the den. The warmth was fading. But it wasn't just the silence, it was the erosion of small kindnesses. At the heart of it all was Margot. She was elegant, always in crisp blouses and polished heels. Her silver hair pulled back into a chignon tight enough to draw blood. She had a voice that could cut through walls and a gaze that made you question everything about yourself. And she used them both with precision. Every visit from Margot felt like a performance review Claire hadn't signed up for. "You used canned broth?" she asked one evening, lifting the spoon with an arched brow. "No wonder Ryan looks thinner." Another time, she ran her fingers across the piano Claire once used for practice and muttered, "Dust." That's the thing about artists, they get lost in the air, forget the ground beneath them. Claire tried to brush it off at first. She told herself Margot's standards came from another generation. But Ryan's silence hurt more than Margot's words. When Claire finally voiced her feelings, Ryan sighed and rubbed his temples. "She's just trying to help. Don't take it personally. She's always been like that." "But I'm your wife," Claire said gently. "Shouldn't that mean something?" He looked at her, distant and tired. "Don't make me choose between you two. It's not fair." That was the moment Claire understood, Ryan wasn't caught in the middle. He had already picked a side. And it wasn't hers. She began to fade into the background of her own life, performing the duties of a devoted wife with the precision Margot admired but the emptiness Claire feared. Days blurred together, cooking, cleaning, arranging things just so. The guitar she once strummed daily now sat in the corner, quietly collecting dust. Margot's visits became more frequent. She would straighten cushions that were already straight, correct Claire's pronunciation of French wines, and subtly reprogram the home Claire had tried to make her own. And Ryan, once her partner, her teammate, her muse, he became a shadow who nodded at Margot and barely noticed Claire. What hurt most wasn't the criticism. It was the absence of defense. The absence of love. Claire had always believed that marriage meant partnership. But what she was living now felt more like performance, a play she hadn't auditioned for, with a script written by someone else. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet fire began to flicker. She just didn't know yet how far it would burn. In the quietest corners of the Martin household, Claire found the only person who truly saw her, Elena. Elena was Ryan's half-sister, 5 years younger, with delicate features and wide, expressive eyes that seemed to hold more emotion than anyone ever gave her credit for. She had been diagnosed with severe neurological damage following a high fever at age 7. Since then, everyone believed she couldn't speak or walk. Margot insisted on complete silence around Elena, saying too much stimulation overwhelmed her. At first, Claire approached Elena cautiously. She'd seen how Margot hovered, correcting how to feed her, how to sit beside her, how to talk to her, as if Elena were a fragile relic, not a human being. But one rainy afternoon, when Margot was away at a charity luncheon, Claire sat beside Elena and whispered, "Do you like music?" Elena blinked once, slowly. Claire hummed a melody from a song she used to sing at open mics in her 20s. A soft smile tugged at the corner of Elena's lips. It was the first response Claire had seen that felt real, not mechanical, not conditioned. From that day on, Claire started spending more time with Elena. She learned to interpret the subtle cues, eye movements, the way her fingers tapped out rhythms on her lap, the pages she lingered on in picture books. Claire introduced her to sketchpads and colored pencils. Elena responded eagerly, sketching little cottages, birds in flight, a girl on a cliffside facing the ocean. There was clarity in those drawings, precision, perspective, even humor. Claire realized Elena wasn't just aware. She was deeply intelligent. Over time, Claire began learning basic sign language at night in secret. Slowly, painstakingly, she built a visual vocabulary. Elena's eyes lit up each time Claire used a new sign. They began communicating more fluidly, their hands forming silent conversations that made Claire feel heard for the first time in months. One morning, Claire signed, "Are you happy?" Elena paused. Then pointed to herself to Claire, and then drew a heart. Claire smiled, tears welling up. Me too. But then came the day that changed everything. Claire had arrived early, letting herself into Margot's home, while Ryan was at a conference. Elena was already waiting, sketchpad in hand. Claire brought coffee, like always, and began signing, "Want to go outside?" But before Elena could respond, she stood. She stood, without hesitation. Claire froze, her coffee cup nearly slipping from her hand. Elena looked at her calmly, then took a few slow, steady steps forward. You can walk," Claire whispered. And then, Elena spoke. Her voice was soft but unmistakably clear. "I trust you." Claire sat down hard on the nearby chair, shaking her head. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Elena's face hardened, eyes narrowing with a weight Claire hadn't seen before. "Because in this family, silence is safer than truth." That sentence, calmly spoken, rattled Claire's very bones. What else was hidden in this family built on performance? What had Claire married into? Claire barely had time to process what she'd seen before the next blow landed. "Wait, so Margot doesn't know?" she asked, her voice tea. Elena gave a tight smile. "No one does. Not Ryan. Not Margot. They all see what they want to see." The timing couldn't have been more surreal. Just the day before, Ryan had come home with a self-satisfied grin, announcing that his family had decided to take a 2-week trip to Ma. "You should stay back," he had said, as casually as if he were asking her to check the mail. "Elena needs someone to care for her. And you're great with her. Mum says she'd feel better KN." Claire's heart had dropped. A vacation they once dreamed of as a second honeymoon was now a family trip she wasn't even invited to. Worse, she was expected to babysit a woman they all believed to be disabled. But now, that illusion had been shattered. "I'm done being their burden," Elena said. "And you're done being their doormat." Claire stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I've already booked the tickets," Elena replied, pulling 2 printouts from a drawer. "We're flying to Maui tomorrow." Claire blinked. "You're serious?" Elena nodded. "First class. Paid for with the inheritance my father left me, the one Margot pretends doesn't exist." Claire felt her knees weaken. The idea of exposing everything felt overwhelming, and yet thrilling. "You're sure about this?" Elena's eyes gleamed with quiet resolve. "Claire, I've spent years pretending to be helpless. It kept me safe. But watching what this family has done to you, I can't stay silent anymore." They spent that night packing light and rehearsing what they would say, though Elena reminded her, "We don't need to scream. The truth is louder than rage." The flight from Halifax to Honolulu felt like stepping into a parallel world. Elena, in jeans and a linen blouse, blended in like any confident traveler. Claire watched her move through security, stroll past baggage claim, and speak softly to hotel staff in fluent, graceful words. For years, the family treated her like furniture. In reality, she was fire, contained until now. They checked into a luxury resort, just 1 building over from the suite Margot had booked. Elena had it all planned, dinner reservations, timing, even backup evidence. Claire didn't ask how she had pulled it off. All she knew was this: the woman she thought she was protecting had become the woman protecting her. By the time they stood at the entrance of the oceanfront restaurant, Claire felt her palms sweating. Inside, Margot, Ryan, and a young woman Claire didn't recognize were laughing over cocktails. "You ready?" Elena asked, her voice steady. Claire looked at the family who had tried to silence her, then turned to the woman who had lived in silence and chose to break free. "Let's show them who we really are." And together they stepped into the light. The sunset over Maui should have been breathtaking. Instead, it became the backdrop for a reckoning. Claire and Elena entered the resort's candlelit restaurant, just as Ryan raised his glass. Margot's laugh rang through the air, artificial and sharp. Seated beside them was a well-dressed young woman, glowing, flirtatious, and disturbingly comfortable with Ryan's hand on hers. They didn't see Claire and Elena at first. But when Claire cleared her throat, heads turned. Ryan's face drained of color. "Claire," he sputtered. What are you doing here?" "Surprised?" Claire asked calmly. "You shouldn't be. After all, family vacations used to include wives." Margot blinked, speechless. Elena stepped forward then, upright, confident and silent no more. Margot dropped her fork. "Elena," she whispered, eyes wide. How are you?" "I've always been fine," Elena said, voice steady. "I just let you believe otherwise. It kept me safe from you." Gasps echoed around their table. Other diners had begun to turn their heads. The illusion of the perfect Martin family cracked under the soft, precise weight of truth. Claire pulled out her phone and tapped play on the recorder. Margot's voice echoed through the speaker, "She's useless. Once Ryan divorces her, we'll claim emotional instability and she won't see a cent. Then Ryan's, I've already spoken to a lawyer. If we twist it right, she walks away with nothing. And I'll have Maya by my side instead." All color drained from Margot's face. Ryan stood quickly, knocking over a wine glass. "Claire, we can talk about this privately." "No," Claire said, her voice rising only slightly. "We're done hiding. You made decisions behind my back, plotted to erase me from your lives. Now you get to face the consequences." She turned to Maya, the woman seated beside Ryan. "You might want to call a lawyer too," Claire said coldly. "Because you'll be served papers soon, for alienation of affection." Maya stood, face pale, and left without a word. Margot's voice trembled. "Claire, please. We didn't mean." Claire held up a hand. "Save it. You wanted me gone. You'll get your wish. But not before I take back what I deserve." The next morning, Claire contacted her lawyer in Halifax and filed for divorce on the grounds of infidelity, accompanied by audio evidence and witness testimony. Within weeks, the case gained traction. Ryan was ordered to pay spousal support and divide marital assets. The lawsuit against Maya proceeded in civil court, with a substantial settlement demand attached. But more than the money. Claire reclaimed her voice. "I'm not someone you erase with paperwork," she told her lawyer. "I'm someone you remember, because I refuse to disappear." As the legal process unfolded, Elena and Claire returned to Halifax, no longer silenced, no longer small. They had faced the storm and emerged not as victims, but as women who turned betrayal into boldness. And neither of them would ever be underestimated again. Claire stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new condo, watching the soft morning light wash over Halifax harbor. Below, the city stirred, joggers along the waterfront, the hum of early buses, the quiet bustle of a life moving forward. She sipped her coffee, now brewed exactly how she liked it. No more adjusting her taste to someone else's preference. No more being asked to bend so someone else could stand tall. It had been 3 months since the divorce papers were finalized. Ryan had transferred the agreed spousal support, though his signature on the check had looked more like a reluctant scrawl than a name. Maya had settled quickly, preferring privacy over a prolonged court battle. Claire didn't feel victorious. She felt clean, like the emotional mud had finally been washed away. In her new condo, sunlight streamed onto hardwood floors and bookshelves she arranged herself. She chose the art, the couch, even the kettle. Every detail, down to the lavender-scented candles, reflected who she was, not who she had been trying to become for someone else. Starting over wasn't easy. But Claire had found clarity in the silence that followed the storm. She launched Bennett Financial Solutions, a boutique advisory firm designed for women going through major life transitions, divorcees, widows, single mothers starting over. Her first 3 clients had all found her through word of mouth. By the end of the second month, she had a waiting list. "I don't just help manage their money," Claire told one reporter who featured her in a local business article. "I help them reclaim their choices." Every call, every meeting, became a brick in the foundation of her new life. And each time she gave a woman the tools to step into financial independence, she felt herself growing stronger. Elena called every week from Vancouver, where she was finally pursuing her dream, enrolled in a graphic design course, and working part-time at a local studio. "You were the first person who saw me for who I really was," Elena had said during one call. "And because of that, I finally learned to see myself." Claire smiled whenever she thought of that. One crisp Saturday afternoon, as she arranged sunflowers in a vase by the window, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Claire. It's Ryan. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But things have fallen apart. I don't know where else to turn. Please, can we talk?" Claire stared at the message for a moment. Then she turned off her phone, walked to the balcony, and let the breeze run through her hair. She didn't need closure. She had clarity. She wasn't the woman who needed to be chosen anymore. She was the woman who had chosen herself. And in that choice, she had built something far greater than revenge. She had built freedom. It was early spring when they showed up, unannounced, uninvited, and unmistakably humbled. Claire was tending to her balcony plants when the intercom buzzed. She almost ignored it, assuming it was a delivery. But something in her chest fluttered, a strange instinct whispering, "Check." When she pressed the screen, her breath caught. Ryan stood there, thinner than she remembered, shoulders hunched. And beside him, Margot. No pearls, no polished coat, no perfection. Just a weathered woman in an oversized cardigan, and the haunted look of someone who had finally run out of control. Claire buzzed them in, not out of kindness but curiosity. She had questions she already knew the answers to. But seeing them in person would be the final thread she needed to cut. When the door opened, Margot looked around the condo with unspoken astonishment. "You live here?" she asked, as if that alone defied her expectations. Claire didn't offer coffee or invite them to sit. She folded her arms and leaned casually against the counter. "What do you want?" Ryan looked at her, his voice quieter than she remembered. "Claire, things have fallen apart. I lost my job. Margot's savings are gone. Maya left when the lawsuit started. We have nowhere else to go." Claire didn't blink. "And?" Ryan hesitated. "We thought, maybe, you could help. Just a little. A place to stay for a bit. Maybe you still care." Margot, her voice thinner than ever, added, "You were always more decent than I gave you credit for." Claire's eyes softened for a moment. Not with pity but resolve. "No." The word landed like a gavel. "I'm not the woman you discarded," she said, steady and clear. "I'm not the girl who tolerated insults in silence. And I am certainly not the lifeline for people who once mocked me for needing support." Ryan's mouth opened slightly, then closed. "Forgiveness," Claire continued, "doesn't mean forgetting who someone truly showed themselves to be. It means I no longer carry the weight of your betrayal. But I don't owe you a thing." Margot's lips trembled. "But family." Claire raised a hand. "You made it clear I was never part of yours." She turned, walked to the door, and held it open. "You'll find your way. Just not through me." Ryan looked at her, hollow-eyed. "You've changed." Claire tilted her head. "No, Ryan. I finally became who I was meant to be, when I stopped needing your approval." They stepped out slowly. And Claire closed the door behind them. Then, without hesitation, she reached for the small ceramic bowl by the entryway, filled with sea salt, and sprinkled a handful across the threshold. Not superstition. Symbolism. A line drawn. A boundary guarded. A life reclaimed. She returned to her living room, bathed in the warm light of her own making, and smiled. Some doors don't slam. Some close softly, with grace, with strength, and without regret. And that's exactly how she chose to end their chapter. Quietly. Finally. And on her terms. Claire didn't mark the date with a red circle or light a candle in commemoration, but she knew exactly when her healing truly began. It wasn't the moment the divorce papers were signed, or when the settlement hit her bank account. It wasn't even when she watched Ryan and Margot walk away from her front door defeated. It was a quiet morning on her own balcony, watching the sunrise over Halifax's harbor. With a steaming cup of coffee in her hand and the cold air brushing her skin, Claire finally felt at peace. Not a dramatic, movie-style breakthrough. Just a deep, steady calm that settled into her bones. The story people saw from the outside might have looked like revenge. Confrontations, lawsuits. Public exposure. But that's not what this had ever been about. Claire never wanted vengeance. She wanted her life back. And more than that. She wanted herself back, the woman she had buried beneath polite smiles, apologies that weren't hers to make, and years of silencing her own needs to avoid rocking the boat. Elena had been her catalyst. The quietest voice in the loudest house. The woman the world dismissed, just like they had dismissed Claire. But in choosing to break her own silence, Elena gave Claire permission to do the same. Now, Elena was enrolled full-time in a visual design program in Montreal. She sent Claire photos of her assignments, logos, illustrations. Mood boards full of wild colors and soft rebellions. Each message came with a note: "You helped me find this part of me. Thank you." Claire always replied the same: "You did it yourself. I just listened." It turned out, sometimes that was the most powerful thing you could do for someone: listen without assuming, believe without proof. And stand beside them without asking for anything in return. Together they'd survived more than betrayal. They'd survived invisibility. And now they were doing more than surviving, they were living. Claire's private advisory business grew slowly but steadily. Her clients were often women like her, starting over after divorce, widowhood, or being pushed out of careers by quieter forms of cruelty. She didn't just offer financial guidance. She offered understanding. Compassion wrapped in spreadsheets. More than once, someone would ask, "How did you move on from something like that?" And she'd smile gently and say, "I stopped waiting for closure from people who were never willing to give it. I gave it to myself." Her story wasn't neat. It wasn't clean. But it was hers. She no longer told herself she should have seen the red flags sooner, or left faster. Shame had no place in her new life. Every step had taught her something, even the painful ones. She still got occasional messages from Ryan, thinly veiled under the guise of updates or checking in. She never replied. Some doors, once closed, stay shut. And when people asked if she regretted anything, her answer was always the same. No. Because being left behind was the push I needed to finally move forward. Because sometimes the people who discard you are doing you the greatest favor, they're removing themselves from the path you were meant to walk alone. Claire and Elena didn't just escape a toxic family. They escaped the belief that suffering was something they had to endure to earn love. They didn't wait to be rescued. They became their own heroes. And their story became a quiet anthem for anyone who had ever been overlooked, silenced, or underestimated. Because empowerment doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You were always enough. You just had to believe it. What if being left behind wasn't a failure, but an invitation to rediscover yourself. Claire's story reminds us that sometimes the people we trust most can also be the ones who silence us, manipulate us, or mistake our kindness for weakness. For years, she shaped her life to fit someone else's mold, trading her dreams for domestic harmony, silencing her voice to keep the peace. But betrayal cracked the illusion. And in those painful fractures, something powerful emerged: clarity, strength, choice. Many of us have been told that holding a family together is the ultimate virtue, that love must endure all things, even disrespect. But what if the most loving thing you can do is walk away from what harms you? Claire didn't choose revenge, she chose dignity. She didn't burn bridges, she simply refused to cross them again. This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about liberation. It's a quiet anthem for anyone who has ever been dismissed, undervalued, or left out of the story. Especially for those in their middle years and beyond, who've given so much and asked for so little. It's a reminder that it's never too late to choose yourself. So let me ask you. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to lose yourself in the process? What would it mean to reclaim your voice, not in anger but in calm certainty? Because maybe the most radical thing we can do is to start over on our own terms.